Hi, my name is Mark Mulligan. I actually live in Annapolis, but I work over here. And I work with one of the three bicycle tour companies that run tours through Easton. So whether you realize it or not, about 800 paying guests a year come and pay to travel the roads around here. The topic isn't cycling per se, it is active travel. I can do that if you want. It is active travel. And I'll talk about a definition for active travel here. So you may or may not have seen this quote before. Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on those accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all its lifetime. Who said it?
Mark Twain.
Sounds right. Sounds right.
So I have two Mark Twain quotes in here. Okay, what do you want on your vacation?
Left.
On the left, this is the buffet, the dessert buffet on a cruise liner. And on the right, this is somebody climbing the 21st switchback up in the Alps. And the answer is, actually, most guests want a little bit of both.
I think the left, yeah, we'll take the left.
Yeah, I'm gonna be over there on the left while Bob's doing the switch.
So we're gonna go through what is active travel, can you do it? We'll talk about walking, picking a trip, cycling, and the fact that you control your experience. And I'll explain each of those as we go through. Active travel. Active travel is a term a lot of people use. Many companies, as I say at the bottom, use the term active travel and adventure travel interchangeably. Correctly, that's not true. If you look at how hard it gets, it starts from many Viking cruises. Why? The boat stops at the bottom of the hill and you have to walk uphill. Most Road Scholars tours are going to have you doing a lot on your feet through the day. Cycling and walking tours and adventure travel. Adventure travel is generally something that requires physical activity or skill that you've developed. So a multi-day kayaking trip in Maine is an adventure travel. Not everybody just steps up and does that. You can do adventure travel bicycling. You can follow the route of the Tour de France and ride half the route every day till you're dead and be happy, but fun. Most people for active vacations can do cycling or walking because most people can cycle.
And you go?
And you go.
At the same time?
Can you do it? If you walked up here, you could probably do it. So the normal answer is yes. For active travel. Adventure travel, like I said, you've got to have certain skills and you work on it. Training. The general rule on training is you want to do half the distance for half the days. Most of the tours are 5-day tours where the final day is moving around, not a lot of riding. The distances are up to 30, 40 miles. So can you do 20 miles on a bike, stopping for lunch, 2 days in a row? If you can, then that's the training level you need to do it, okay? Everything is easier in group, including overexerting yourself, getting competitive, pushing yourself to go harder or faster. We always tell people when they come out, I'm going to talk about risks in a minute, they go, what's our biggest risk out here? We said, look around the room. You are the biggest risk to you. Most of the accidents are guests banging into each other. Oh, look, a great blue heron. Where? Bang. They hit the person in front of them, okay? It happens. We say that every time. We give rules. The other one we tell them is don't bunch up, spread out. Perfect proof that humans are herd animals like horses. I can't get people to sped up. They'll be going down the back roads in the county, and instead of in little groups of 4 or 5 that vehicles can get around, they would have all 20 people clogged up together. The catalogs, and I have some catalogs over there, and I'm going to leave a couple of catalogs with the Y if you want to stop by. But you can also find these online. The catalogs will have pictures and have difficulty ratings. The difficulty ratings are not standard. Each company does it a little different. We have a famous quote with the guides you do for VBT in Czechoslovakia, which everyone has gone loved, and they rate themselves as moderate. And you go there, there's a lot of hills, and they say, how can you call this moderate? And the guy just looked in the eye and said, we lied, or you wouldn't have come. But they lived there, they did. So you want to, generally they're comparative, but I will tell you that a moderate or hard means a different thing to VBT, which is one company, Discovery, and something else entirely to Trek bicycling vacations, which is where people who are really serious cyclists go. I mean, we have a joke. It's you go out and you say, did you see the beautiful flowers? And the people from the other tours will say yes. And Trek will say, you should have seen the flowers. You should have been riding harder.
Crossroads.
Okay, let's talk about risk. The catalogs would call a tour self-guided or guided. And I'd say there's actually more than that. There's self-guided where they're gonna make your hotel reservations for you and you're doing it all on your own. Someone will meet you, give you maps, okay? That's actually very useful in Europe. It's not a bad way to travel in Europe. There's self-guided baggage transfer. So they're gonna meet you the first day, they're gonna take your bags, and they won't support you during the day, but they'll transfer your baggage, and they'll pick your baggage up the next day. The way some of this is done is the guided tour and the self-guided baggage transfer are offset by a day. So the van is in the area and it's just making shuttle runs in between. There is supported. Supported means you have a van out there following you, giving you refreshments and stuff. And then there's fully guided, meaning there's a guide on a bike. A lot of people assume that self-guided is just that, and that anything that's guided is fully guided, has a person on the bike with them. That's not always true. And then you need to understand what the guide's going to do. If the guide's going to mix and go back and forth to try and spend time with all the guests, or if the guest's going to sweep, meaning they're at the back. Some guests get really nervous if they're at the back and there's not a sweep guide. You got to listen attentively to the guide's risk brief. It is always based on the standard stuff they say, and then if you listen carefully, it's based on what people on their tour have done before. Okay, so when they say, don't clump up and block the whole road while trying to cross Route 50, know that a group clumped up and blocked the whole road while trying to go across Route 50. Most cycle tour companies do not have seats for every person on tour in the accompanying van. It's typical to have a 15-piston van and 20 to 25 people. So if lightning or bad weather comes, you're going to have to shelter best you can, and they're going to have to shuttle you back. Does anyone know where Kingston Landing is in the county, out on the Chop Tank? It's a little boat launch out that way.
Yeah, I think I've been there.
We were out there and the worst cold rainstorm started, and we had a trailer for the bikes, and we disconnected the trailer, and it took a load back, and then there were 8 of us jogging in place inside the trailer trying to stay warm. Which will give me to another point. Those people all had fun. Because one of the things we talk about is you control your your adventure. These things always run regardless of weather, unless it's a complete washout. We had only one, where it rained the entire week. And people loved it. They still had fun. We made it work. We modified some of the things. Illness before and illness during the trip. Illness before, most of the, you gotta know the refund policies, the trip insurance policies. If it's overseas, does the trip insurance include added costs for airline changes or medical evacuation by air, which is a different thing entirely. Okay, if you buy those, they will actually send, and they're not kidding, a Learjet over with a flight nurse to bring you back. But you'll pay like $500 per trip for that. And so you gotta go. So you say, well, I'm in Europe, probably not bad. I'm in Thailand, yeah, maybe I want to do that. And they will come, and enough people pay it that they don't fly, that they can afford to do it. Injury during, okay. Or injuring during or right before. Can you ride in the bus or van every day? Normally the answer is yes, that's what it's for, but occasionally there's a day where they're transferring equipment that it's not available. You want to know that before you go. What happens? Are there any must ride or must walk days? Now, the three companies I'm talking about here that go in this area don't do that. I had another company up at Prince Edward Island that did that. One day, everybody rides because they have to shift gear back and forth. So the companies I'm talking about, I mentioned this to a group before we started, so I'll go through again. VBT, Bicycling Vacations, Discovery, and Wilderness Voyageurs. Now, do tours that come through Easton. So I was going to highlight them, and I invited them to send good shores. So the first two, VBT and Discovery, are kind of interesting. They both started in Vermont. VBT was Vermont Bicycle Tours, and Discovery was Vermont Cycle Tours. You think that caused some confusion? People would call the wrong group. So over time, they changed their names. VBT is just the initials. It's like AT&T. It doesn't stand for anything anymore. Okay, so it's VBT, Bicycling Vacations, and VCT became Discovery. Wilderness Voyageurs has run for years whitewater rafting trips up on the Youghiogheny River out of Ohiopyle, Pennsylvania. And then because the Great Allegheny Passage goes through there, they started doing bike trips on the trail, and they spread out. So they're a more local group. So talking about injuries, can you ride? Are there must-ride walks? Can you still have fun visiting sites if you have to ride in the van? And two guides on tour allow one to stay with the group while the other attends to somebody injured. Normally, if somebody gets injured, the cycling guide is the one that gets them first. The van comes, picks them up, takes them to emergency room if they need it, and go on from there. So the worst we've had is somebody fell down and got a big flap of skin torn open. And the two guys were diligently trying to talk this woman into going to the hospital emergency room here, and she didn't want to do it. One of the other guys steps forward and goes, I've been a nurse for 35 years, hon. You're going to the hospital. I'm going to knock you out and take you there. So she went. Not something we get to say.
It's been a big flap.
Okay, it was. So you know how, as you get old, so this is a lady in her 70s, and thin skin, you can start getting that. Even though she was very athletic, very active, you still get the thin skin at some point in your life, and that's what happened.
She was never a politician.
No. She, in St. Michael's, she drifted in while she was looking at something, and on an intersection, she caught the curb and went down across it. Okay, let's talk about personal risk, and we'll talk about some of the routes we ride around here. Almost everybody, all these different bike groups come into Easton, and they ride out to St. Michael's. And they'll ride out through Oxford across the ferry and generally ride back on St. Michael's Road. In the rest of the county, and down when they go to Cambridge, almost everybody goes to Cambridge. BBT only goes up to Kent County. They're riding on the county roads. So what makes bicycling so attractive on the eastern shore of Maryland?
Flat.
It's very flat.
Yep, actually it's combines, agricultural combines. The major county roads all have 8-foot shoulders on them to allow a combine to not block oncoming traffic, which provides readily made bike lanes.
So they're not bicycle trails.
We thought they were, yeah, we thought.
Yeah.
No, the wide shoulders are there for combines to get out. If you've ever watched combines, when they move off those roads and they come on 50, they're required to take their cutter heads off and throw them on a semi so they're not over whipped. But they don't want to go from farm to farm that way. So, the counties around there have all gone the wider roads. Why? For agriculture, that makes this a good area for cycling. You go other counties in Maryland up near the Mason-Dixon line, not as much agriculture. It's wooded, but it's not the same big, large scale agriculture. You don't have the shoulders. You ride out in traffic.
It's not every county road though, right?
No, what it will be is it's the major roads.
That have a route number on them.
Yes. And basically, the combines will preferentially move out to those roads and to take the shortest road out of there. But that's what sets it up. It's agriculture that made this place good. What do you think of Route 33? Does that road scare you to bicycle on?
Well, the drivers that are on that road scare me.
There's Exxon's, there's a station, I believe, and coming this way, I'm not real fond of that intersection at all.
So actually, when we go out there, we do the zigzag. We go to Glebe to come into town rather than coming in on St. Michael's. So they go, some people hate that road. They think it's the busiest road in the world. I grew up in New Jersey. I ride in Baltimore and Washington, D.C. I'm like, what traffic?
Yeah.
But it's
not the traffic, it's the people who are driving and they're looky-loos, looking at everything, and then all of a sudden, bam! And that happens almost, it's every couple of days, we get an alert. The road has been blocked down for an accident, so it's.
So this is kind of, I'm telling you this to talk about your risk tolerance. When they come through here, they use that, and if you go to an area and you've got a town that's very scenic or picturesque that you want to go to, and there's only one road in there, it's probably going to have traffic. So a couple of comments. One, that Route 33 is wide, St. Michael's Road. It has one narrow bridge, which we warn people about. And we went and got the National Highway Safety Administration data on accidents from 2010 to 2020. There were no accidents in that 10-year period on St. Michael's Road. Bicycle accidents.
Wow.
What that means is there were no accidents where police or ambulance were called. There was no accidents that triggered a response. Doesn't mean that somebody didn't crash, fall over. Meant there was no response. In the whole county, there were 5, all in Easton, except one completely randomly was in Tunis Mill. And that's random. There's nothing in Tunis Mill. But perceived risk and actual risk may be different. some people come out on the trips, and it's always going to be on a bike trail or no traffic at all. That's not going to be true generally. So you need to adjust your expectations and study the area.
What was chip seal?
Chip seal? Chip seal is the road surface we preferentially use in the county. They put tar down and then they spread loose chips on it, and then they put another layer over the top. It's completely backwards. They reseal it periodically. It's roughest when it's brand new, and as it gets older, it gets smoother. So chip seal is a bit of a risk because when it's first new, the car tires throw piles of chips out to the side and you can run into them with your bike wheel. Chip seal is also, or was for years, the preferred paving method in the west of Ireland. And they've now gone to smooth general US style pavement. And everywhere they put a section in, they got a sign that says, "Caution, slippery pavement," because the chip seal does have a lot more grip, and the Irish hit good high-speed roads, and they slide right off.
Nothing to do with drinking.
Nothing to do with drinking.
Okay, let's talk about walking tours, walking versus cycling. Many people will find a walking tour more fatiguing than cycling. Being on your feet for long periods of time can really tire you out. You have to manage your fluid intake. When you're on a cycling tour, they're going to stop, set up the water jugs, give you a water bottle that fits on the bike. It's easy. You don't have to think about it. On a hiking tour, you have to watch what you're doing. So I have a couple of pictures there. And one is I have the Nalgene bottle, the little blue bottle, as opposed to the Camelback. Some people need the visual feedback of the Nalgene bottle in their hand running down, where the Camelback, they lose track whether they drank or not. You got to know yourself. The little funny stool in the corner is a pack stool that weighs 1.5 pounds. If you are a person who is going to get fatigued, you can carry that in a backpack and you can sit down when you're looking at stuff. And a hiking pole and good shoes. I really recommend that if you go on a walking or hiking tour, you don't do it in the kind of shoes we all wear day to day. That you at least get a lightweight hiker, which looks like a sneaker, but is actually made with a little more support for hiking. You also, if you're going to go on a trip, you want to buy the shoes you're going to go on the trip on in advance. So I was a scoutmaster for years, and we used to tell the kids before they went out to very involved long hikes, like out to New Mexico, where they'd hike over 80 miles, to buy a new pair of boots and wear it to school for 2 months before they went out, so they were completely broken in. Trekking poles. A lot of people like trekking poles. A lot of the groups that do walking tours will provide them. If you bring your own, you need to know that they have carbide metal tips, which are made to dig into even rocks so that you get grip. And they destroy streets, marble steps in Italy, anything else. And you are going to need tips for those to sheath them before you go places. Probably better to make sure you have a cover for the tip, or they're rubber tipped, or just rely on what the group gives out. Where do trekking poles get used most often? Uphill, downhill. Downhill. People don't realize that. Most people can climb uphill. It's downhill when you're going to have a chance of overflexing your knee that people want to plant a hand and lean on it. And casual walking versus hiking. It's the surface you're on. If you get into hiking, you may be on rougher trails. If you go on the way of St. James in Spain, you're going to be in all kinds of surfaces, including, Roman trails through the woods. If you go on a city tour with, what's the walking group? Oh, Road Scholar. By the way, little side, what's the original name of Road Scholar? And it's still the name of the company.
Oh, my mom used to do that all the time. What was that?
It's like the worst marketing in the world.
It's,
Hospice,
hospice.
yeah.
Elder Hostel. Elder Hostel. Well, it may be descriptive in Europe. It didn't motivate Americans to go on tours, so they changed it to Road
And it
Scholar.
was a lot cheaper when it was that than it is now as Road Scholar.
Okay, we've got handouts here. When you look in the catalogs, when you look at the catalog or the online pictures, what do the guests look like? Do they look like me? What is their fitness level? What is their age group? What about that group down in the lower right?
17.
They look like they want to go fast.
That's the Trek Tours, which is going to set you up on fast Trek road machines and try and go out on, everything Trek does. And I work for a Trek bike shop. They want to sell bikes. But you also look at the age. If you look at the age on that group, they're much younger.
I think the people in the top right are my size.
I second that.
You resemble that.
I resemble that, exactly.
But look at this, because they don't use models in the catalogs. They take pictures of actual tours. If you're getting a lot like this, or you're getting a lot with kids and you don't want youth on them, and I can talk about in the backup slide, that's something you want to think about. Okay, picking a trip. Kind of the way I would do it is, where would you like to go? Don't even think if you're cycling or walking or just taking a bus tour. Start with where you want to go. Then what activity level are you comfortable with? Then the accommodations. Now the differences between the groups is often in the accommodations and price point. One group I'm not talking about here is backcountry, because they don't have a tour in this county. BBT, who I work for in backcountry, mark each other's prices and try and do it. They're both upscale. They both try and get really good dining experiences. So if they come to Easton, where is BBT going to have you eat in Easton?
Barouche.
Oh, jeez.
No, I don't think so.
Out of the Fire, we've used Out of the Fire,
Yeah, that's good.
and then we've used Legal Assets in the past.
Or
Or you can go to Easton.
Or Mama Maria's and track.
St. Michael's, we go to the Crab Claw.
I was gonna say, well, of course you would. But in Oxford, you might go to post, a couple.
But we don't stop in Oxford. So some of the others, so the Wilderness Voyageur stays in a guest house in Oxford down near the ferry.
Which would be
I
fun.
base out of there.
Yeah.
We stay in the Tidewater. For cycling, not all tours have e-bikes. That's becoming less and less true. E-bikes are proliferating. For VBT, the only country in the world that doesn't have e-bikes for their tours is Vietnam. The Vietnamese seriously don't get it. Why do you put an electric motor on a bicycle? I either use my 90cc Yamaha or I use my bicycle.
Yeah.
Nothing else makes sense. So culturally, they don't sell any there because people won't buy them. Therefore, there's not shops to support them. Therefore, the tour companies have not been willing to introduce them. With VBT that goes to 40 countries, that's the only country where they don't have them. Cost is determined by a number of things. So first one is going to be the accommodations and dining. If you really want to go upscale, it's going to cost you. If you want to be more affordable, you can take tours that will use, instead of Big hotels in Europe, you'll see a lot of bed and breakfasts, which are affordable. Your tour group may be spread around several of them. Self-guided, guided. Obviously, self-guided is always going to look cheaper, but you got to decide, since self-guided generally doesn't include meals, what do the hotels add up to? What the meals add up to? What are you really saving? And do you want to do the hassle of transferring stuff around on your own? The number of guides, whether you have 2 guides, you have one on the road. So when I went to Ireland, I went with a tour that was supported but single guide in the van only. And we stayed in bed and breakfast. That was affordable. Actually, 5 days in Ireland was just slightly cheaper than 5 days on the eastern shore of Maryland. You may be able to get special airplane deals. A number of these tour companies will set up a group airline purchase if you get in early, and therefore they can help you get a discounted ticket. Because the airlines love groups that come in and book early. They'll give them a break. It helps them fill the planes up. Where is the company from? Is kind of interesting. Some companies are definitely US. Some companies are international, and some companies are purely local. Regardless of whether the company is local, what are the guides? So when I went and toured in Ireland, I went to a purely local company. Local guides, everything else. If I had done a similar tour with BBT, I would have had local guides, and the company, because BBT is an international company, would have been run out of the European hub in Hamburg. In fact, when I interviewed for the job, I had an interview with the chief guide, Jans Henneker from Hamburg, who speaks better English than I do.
When you work through an international operator, do you have to, you're going to have, do you pay it, do you have issues with money exchange and stuff like that? Or do they take American?
You normally do money exchange up front. They will tell you generally if you're going overseas, if it's they'll tell you what kind of things you'll have to pay for and what you won't. But even in Europe, I mean, you can go to an ATM.
No, I meant that, like if it's a European country operating a tour that you're wanting to take, and you're American, you're paying there, is that?
It varies. Some of them will quote the cost in the local currency. Some will actually have rates in US dollars. So it's whether they're willing to take the currency risk or you're willing to take the currency risk. Mark Twain's other quote on bicycling, this one is more known.
You'll never regret it if you did.
Okay, cycling trips in general. So I've talked about walking, we've talked about planning. I know most about cycling, so I'll go through that. The bike setup that feels comfortable for 100 miles a year is not necessarily comfortable for 100 miles a week. Okay, that's the problem. Most people who have bikes set them up to ride them 3 or 4 miles alternate weeks throughout the year. People new to cycle touring often want handlebars higher, seats wider, and seats lower than would be dictated by their size. And proper bike fit is not elitism or hubris on the guide's part. It's based on biomechanics. For example, a low saddle height can overflex the knee, leading to pain. 3 types of road bikes offered. I've got them lined up over here. And I'll show pictures in a minute. We've got the classic road bike, hybrids, and e-bikes. This is kind of interesting. We had somebody came and requested a hybrid and then said, Where's the electric motor?
Oh.
Hybrid cars have electric motors. Don't hybrid bikes have electric
Oh my
motors?
gosh.
Hybrid refers to a hybrid between a mountain bike and a road bike. It's got elements of each. That's the hybridism. Road bikes are classic with the drop bars, and the e-bike we have in the back. So let's start talking about the only e-bikes you're going to get from a tour group are what's called a class 1. There's no throttle. It adds to your pedaling effort. You still work, but for a given input, you go 1/3 to 3 times as far or as fast. They're limited to 20 miles an hour. Specifically, the assist starts cutting out around 17 or 18 miles an hour. When you hit 20 miles an hour, you're doing it all on your own. People ask me what they feel like. It doesn't feel like there's a motor on the bike for this type. So this type of bike is a class 1 e-bike with a bottom bracket motor. That means the pedals go through the motor. Okay, I'll bring one up if you want.
We're all turning around.
Yeah, I don't want people turning around. So this is a class 1 e-bike. The motor is underneath the bottom. The pedal axle, called the crankset, goes through the motor. And because you're pedaling directly into the motor, it has no lag. It senses when you add power and it adds its power. It senses instantaneously when you come off. The sensation is not that it's powered. The sensation is that you're suddenly Lance Armstrong. Okay, it feels like you're just incredibly powerful. You don't feel like there's a motor in there at all. There are a kind where they have the motor in the wheel. It works the same way, but they do have a lag. So when you stop pedaling, there's a half-second lag before the motor cuts out. When you start pedaling, there's a half-second lag before it comes on. Because you've got to get the torque you're putting in the pedals through the chains of the sensors in the back wheel. So I like this design better for the way it feels, it handles.
You mentioned earlier about the seat.
I'm going to go into seats.
Okay.
I'm going to go into seats. So this is the widest seat we have here on the e-bikes. We occasionally, just by luck more than design, the seat posts are all the same size. There's about a dozen different sizes, but I can literally unbolt the seat, throw it on that bike if somebody wants it, and I do that frequently.
Question, can you get a wider, more comfortable seat and put it on it?
So I'll talk about that in detail. My first argument is wider seats are actually not likely to be comfortable over the longer term, and I'll go through that. Okay, so let's look at cycling. Notice this line. The line is going from the handlebar to over the saddle. This is a cruiser bike. It's not offered by any of the bicycling tour companies. This may be 8 inches, 12 inches. You're super upright. Hybrids are offered, and this is coming down to the area of 4 to 6 inches handlebar above the seat. You can see it in that one back here. The handlebar is above the seat on this one. Say again?
It's above the seat on this one too.
Yes. But generally on the e-bikes, it's less above the seat than on the hybrid. On the road bike, they're basically level. And that shows that this is a specific type of road bike. This type of road bike, so let me see. I was better off where I was, so you can see how I'm doing it. This type of road bike is called an endurance road bike. It's meant for you to ride long distances. The name of this bike is a Gran Fondo. Gran Fondo is It's an Italian word. We would call it a century ride. It's a bunch of people going out and trying to ride about 100 miles. A Gran Fondo, the metric measurement is around 110, I think. This is carbon bike. It's very light. The carbon dampers the road. It's got road vibration. It's got really good handlebars, handlebar tape. To me, this is the most comfortable bike to ride, but a lot of people would not touch this thing because of the geometry. Okay, so 17 pounds for the road bike, 24 pounds for the hybrid, 54 pounds for the e-bike. Would you like to guess how people injure themselves with e-bikes?
Lifting them.
No, they stop and they don't get a foot down quick enough and the bike just pulls them over. This is the rough cost of these bikes. So as we move from a past where this was the default bike, where the e-bike's becoming a default bike, you can see how it may slowly drive up the cost of tours over time. Also, the maintenance is higher. So e-bikes, the history of e-bikes, okay? This is 45 pounds. And the one on the right is 54 pounds. Why did it get heavier?
Well, there's a structural component.
Yep. So people said this bike is 45 pounds, and I don't like throwing my leg up over it. Can you get a step-through design? Well, the step-through design, because it's so weak from an engineering design, takes 10 pounds more metal to work. I mean, they got the same motors and everything else. By the way, this is not significantly heavier than the hybrid because 23 pounds is the weight of the motor and the battery and the control unit. So basically, if you take all that off, it's the same weight. It's this thing on here that's adding more. So e-bikes, the battery will last 7 to 8 hours and go all day long. We've actually gone out and challenged guests to kill the battery, give them a fully charged battery, go, yeah, just scream as you can, go, we've never had it in 40-mile days, we can never have anybody bury the battery. They ride well on the flat, as well as the hybrid. You actually, with the motor off, don't know you're on an e-bike until you hit a hill, and then the weight comes into play. Okay, saddles. We're going to talk about saddles. What you've got here in the middle is hip bones, and the fact that saddles are designed for you to be sitting on those bony parts. That's what you're supposed to do. If you sit cushioned on the fleshy part, you wind up chafing, getting your way to saddle sores, etc. So they come through and they go, and the different positions, you know, you're very upright, you get a wider saddle, you're very racing, leaning forward, you get a narrow, but all of them have you sitting on your hip bones. Whereas these very wide comfort saddles do not. You're sitting on your cheeks. Over a long enough period of time, that can cause a problem. Now, probably not in the total distance you're riding on a bike tour of 30, 40 miles a day for 4 to 5 days. So if you're used to those ones, bring the saddle. They can adjust the saddle. They can put the saddle on. You can also bring pedals. If you have cleated shoes and you want your kind, bring your pedals and they can put it on. The other thing we were mentioning before, the engineer, Georgina Terry, She invented the saddle you see in the upper right, but she didn't patent it deliberately. She wanted people to copy it. It was called the Terry Butterfly. It's hollow in the middle. So what it's meant to do is it catches those two hip bones and it avoids pressure on the middle part, and that works as a benefit to both men and women. Almost all good saddles have it now, even if it's shallow. On this more racing type saddle, it's still there, relieves pressure. Okay, going back to everything they taught me when I was in grade school was wrong. Which of these two is true? When you sit on the saddle, you should be easily put your feet on the ground. When you sit on the saddle, you should not be able to touch the ground except with your toes while leaning slightly to the side.
Second.
It's the second one. A lot of people want to be able to sit on the saddle with both feet flat on the ground. If you do, your knee is so flexed that at the top of the stroke, you're really overstretching it and it can lead to knee pain. That again, if you are new to cycling, don't worry about it. The total distance you're going to do is probably not enough to cause problems. If you're like me and you ride 100 miles or more a week, it would be deadly. So here's a picture of this. So the road style bike, he's got about a 10, 15 degree flex in his knee. There's no way he's going to be able to put a foot down. In fact, most of them will come off the saddle when they stop to put feet down. In the recreational cyclist, it's closer to 25. You can reach with 1 foot, but you're still going to have to lean. Tour guides will put the saddle wherever you want, but, and this is important, they will size your bike based on your height and height tables versus leg length tables. And by the way, what does a 5'4" woman and a 5'7" man have in common? Same leg length. Women, more of their body height as a percentage is in the legs than men. So when we size these things, so you get a little bike like this, we can fit a woman down to right around 5 foot. Guys out of luck at about 5'3". They size it on a foot. If you really want a low saddle height, the bike they assign to you may not work. You may not have the room to put it down any further. We've had people get on this bike in particular and bottom out, and they want lower, and we can't do it. Depending on where the spare bikes are stored, we're very lucky here, the VBT people, we have our bike stored in Easton. You come in on a Sunday and I don't like it, we'll get you another one. That's not true for the other groups. They don't have the bikes right here. They can't switch it out. You will see people that have done tours before that specify, I want a 48 centimeter frame bike. And you'll look and they'll go 52 or an inch bigger is what they come out by. The height tables, they'll specify they want to slice down to override what the guest registration computer is going to recommend. This is something you could do ahead of time if you sign up for your first one. If you want to go look at these kind of bikes we looked at and maybe go to a bike shop and try a couple on and see. And ask the bike shop, what height should you be riding at, which will probably seem high. That's what you're going to be fitted to when you go on the tour, and then see if there's enough room. And if you say, I'm really worried, I want a smaller size, you can ask, should you bring your own bike? First of all, make sure it's allowed. Then there's the cost of transporting it by air. Don't bring a cruiser or a 1-speed. It's too much of a mismatch to what everybody else is using. Guides will have spare parts for the company bikes only. They have a lot of spare parts. We actually carry spare wheels. It looks like Tour de France. You have a flat, we'll come out of the van with a wheel, throw a new wheel on, patch the flat later. A tandem bike, you need to ask. Tandem bikes will fit some kind of trailers, won't fit others, and that's kind of up to the guides. Okay, when we go out, we have a van that has to take bikes on the top and can take bikes on the roof of the trailer and inside the trailer. When we take a bike and we put it up there, it takes one person on the ground, one person there to put it up. We can't, by OSHA rules, put those on the roof. It would take 4 people, 2 people on the ground, 2 people on top to make the lift rules. The others we can. A tandem may be in that same realm. So what happens is you bring a tandem, they're going to ask the guides, and the guides are going to turn and ask you, are they willing to help pass the bike up? Because we're reaching the point where we're going to need another set of hands, and the guides can say no. Should you bring your own bike? Maybe if you're a female under 5'3" and you want an e-bike, or you're a female under 5 foot and you want anything but a road bike. It may be getting real tight. If you have a physical limitation that requires a modified bike, so how do you modify a bike? So I have a friend that has fused vertebrae, can't bend this far in the lower back. They take this off and they bolt on an extender that can bring the handlebar all up here. That's an after-market ad. It cannot be done on a carbon fiber bike. It can be done on an aluminum bike. We can't do that. But if you have those kind of things, then maybe you want to bring your own bike. Or if you keep your bike in your bedroom at night so you can fondly gaze it, then maybe you need to bring it with you. In lieu of bringing your own bike, consider bringing your saddle and pedals. That's pretty standard. I have a saddle I want. In fact, that makes so much sense. When I go touring, I always do that. I want my saddle because I'm used to it. Do not bring a bike made before 1996 or any department store bike. I will tell you why. It's got to do with the brakes. We came, and I don't have any of them here, we came with about 1996, maybe a year or two earlier, we came with a new design of rim brakes called a linear pull that are very powerful and stop. And the bikes made before that have the old cantilevers and they don't stop. So when you mix these two types of bikes up, the ones with the weaker brakes crash into the ones in front of them. It's too big a difference. All these bikes here, interestingly enough, have disc brakes, but they have hydraulic disc brakes. There's no cables. These are not cables. These are hoses. There's a little tiny reservoir in here, and they're running hydraulic brakes. The e-bike needs hydraulic brakes based on the weight. Okay? These do not, but they've done for performance. On the Eastern Shore of Maryland, you don't need hydraulic brakes, but they buy the fleet, all the same. A mechanical disc brake would work fine. And our older hybrids, which are black, actually have the linear pull brakes. But what happens is that when you've got the hydraulic brakes and you get on a very long hill, if you were with the old mechanical pull brakes, you would be doing this, your hands would be cramping up, you'd feel it. With these, you can be going down a 22% grade, put a single finger on it, and push it. And it will brake for you, and you'll never feel any fatigue in your hands. That's what it does. it can magnify your hand pressure enough to cut down fatigue. So I had told people for years, I thought hydraulic brakes on road bikes was complete waste. Till I had the chance to ride down a big hill and I said, okay, I get it now. Okay, how to use brakes and gears. A lot of people honestly do not understand what the brakes, how the gears especially work. Okay, on brakes, and this is important, in the US, the front brake is on the left. In Europe, the front brake is on the right. Why? I have no idea. It's just the way they build the bike. You get a bike mechanic here, he'll put it together one way, you get a bike mechanic put the other way. That means that the brakes may be reversed when you go on a tour in Europe. What they tell you is remember that when you brake, the one thing you don't want to do is lock the front brake by mashing down on it. Because if you lock the front wheel, you can flip the bike. Now you go to Europe and you squeeze the right harder because you're used to that being the rear brake and it's not. So you need to look at the bike when you go there. When you brake, you should shift your weight back. If you shift your weight back, you can't flip the bike. The old mountain bikers, so if I was doing a panic stop, I would probably be sitting here on the rack, literally, as I jammed on both brakes. With hydraulic brakes, you may actually be able to lock the wheels, which would stop steering, not be real good. So you want to squeeze it down and stop. Okay, gears. The gears are a transmission, like a transmission in your car. And they're based on the fact that while the rear wheel can go on a wide ranges of speeds based on the condition, your legs are most efficient from about 50 RPM to about 80. And the answer is not when you hit a hill to be sitting there just barely turning over. It's to get in a gear that allows your feet to spin at about that. So as you go on the hill, you'll keep shifting, your feet will slow down, you'll shift to make your feet speed back up. As you go down the hill, your feet will be going too fast, you'll shift to make them slow down. Okay? All I can tell you is, I can give you rules and how it works, but you need to just experiment. The small gears in the back make you go fast. The big gears in the front make you go fast. They work opposite ways. Normally we tell people if you're not used to shifting a lot, put the front one, if there's 3, in the middle. If there's only 2, put it on the smaller one and never shift again. You're shifting on back. We're in Maryland. You don't need the little tiny front gear to climb hills here. The first hill on the tour is not when you want to learn shifting. Okay? So we're over in Chestertown, coming back from Chestertown to Rock Hall. And the back way through there, there's one little short steep hill, like one hill, where it goes up. It's like 200 feet long. You're going up there. And one lady just couldn't get it. We learned out later, she was 75. Her daughter was a triathlete, married to a triathlete. And the two of them had ganged up on her to make her go on a bike tour, but had never bothered to actually go riding with her and teach her how to ride. She was fairly physically fit. You control your experience. This is really important. I mentioned the time we got stuck in the horrible rain. Well, everybody had fun. In fact, it became an adventure. It became something they laughed about, all the rain and everything we did. And another group, the Tidewater Hotel didn't have hot water one night, and they told it was a completely failed tour, and they felt like they were camping out. And, I have to be professional as a guide and not say what I really think. It was just a world of difference. You control your experience, so be positive. All these tour companies, I'll add, really do read all the evaluations. And so if you have specific things you want to do or specific, I put that in the evaluation. Okay, so the backup, I've just had the places that I've gone, and then I've got a thing after that on different bike tour companies, if you have any questions. So the different tour companies have different minimum ages, whether they take kids or not. Some of them do take kids down to like 4 or 5, but on family-only tours. Some will take a 13-year-old as an adult, some won't take any at all.
How big are the groups limited to?
So we run 20, and I believe that's what the other 2 groups in this area are doing, just looking in their equipment. So generally, you've got 20 bikes, 22, because each of the guys has a bike. Okay, and you've got a 15-passenger van. And that's what you're running at when you go out there. Now, we do have one place when we go up north, and the Florida tour has a place where they hire a second for the day based on what they have to do. But generally, you just have the one.
My bike tours, is this a Mike Lindell company?
No, this is me. This is just me.
It's a bit.
That's right. I know, my pillow, yes. But then I'd have to go into the political ad, and I don't want to do that. These are places I've gone. If you ask me what my favorite tour was, it's probably this one. Active England, they're now a partner of VBT, so that exact same tour is offered in the VBT catalog.
Okay.
And it was, Oxford, Bath, the Cotswolds, Blenheim Palace, and Highclere Castle, which is Downton Abbey.
Definitely.
That's a fun ride. If you really want to see Highclere, you've got to watch the schedule of Highclere, because the family goes to London for 9 months and then comes to Highclere for 3 months, and then it's closed. So that's how they do that. Any questions? Bikes or tours or anything else?
What have you heard? I've been getting things recently in my email feed about barge and bike tours.
Barge and bike tours are very big. What a barge and bike tour does is they go down through all the canals you've got in Europe. Obviously, there's a lot in Holland, but they go further than that. Barges are very tight on accommodations. Okay, it makes the old Navy coffin racks look generous. You'll be these. Quite often, they're 2 tiny bunks.
Yeah.
And a bathroom, and that's a cabin. And they've got maybe 4 of these cabins. They cook on board. Normally, it's a family that owns the barge and is putting in service and hiring out. But the bike trips all day run along the route the canal's going. So if you don't want to ride, it's coming up, and your van is the barge. Literally, if somebody has trouble, somebody goes back down and weighs down the barge, it stops. Yes.
I have a question, just as what company are you with?
I'm with BBT Bicycling Vacations. But I would recommend any of the 3 companies that do tours through here, because I've seen all 3 of them on the road, and I've talked to their guests, and they're all very similar. The 3 companies that run through Easton in this area are BBT Bicycling Vacations, Discovery Bicycling Tours, and Wilderness Voyageurs out of Ohio, Pennsylvania. BBT has a separate walking tour company called Country Walkers.
Have you done the Jekyll Island?
I have done Jekyll Island. People that come out, we have a high amount of crossover from people doing Maryland Eastern Shore, doing Jekyll Island. They're both very flat.
Very flat.
Jekyll Island is in Georgia. So it's an interesting, Georgia, and then you go down to St. Augustine. So Jekyll Island was a playground of the very rich, and the government took it over for a military base in World War II. At the same time, the IRS rules changed, and people started getting a lot of back taxes on it. So after the war, they went to give it back. Most people didn't want it back. They just gave it over to the government for back taxes, and the state owns it all, including the church. Some of the really nice houses are there, and everything else. It's kind of weird. It's one of the only places in this country where you play land rent. People bought houses on the north side of the island. They do not own the land their houses are bought on. The state park owns the land, which is the way it works in the city of London.
And New York.
In parts of New York? Yeah.
New York City.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
This is Carla. I wanted to know about the Active England tours. And I mean, my experience on British and probably Irish and Scottish roads are that there's walls up next to you. They're very narrow. And how dangerous are those, I guess, is my question.
So let me talk. I can't talk Scotland. I can talk the west of Ireland, and I can talk the Cotswolds, that specific tour. The area is super low traffic once you're off the A roads and M roads, our county roads and the equivalent of interstate highways. They are narrow. I never understood a Morris Minor until I went to the Cotswolds and said, okay, now I know why people wanted tiny cars here. People on those country roads meet each other, and there's a wide spot where the hedge is knocked back every quarter mile or so, and somebody has to back up. And we were on one of those roads, and our van with the trailer met a cement mixer.
Oh, geez.
And the two of them started arguing, and our guy just said, I got a trailer, mate. I got a beer in the cooler. I'm going to sit down and drink. You do whatever you feel you need to. I just refused to talk to the cement mixer, who had to back up the quarter mile to get out of there. I don't think they're dangerous. I think it's reasonable. In that Cotswolds tour, which also includes Oxford and Bath, as you go into the cities, you hit the secondary roads, and they're generally pretty good. People are reasonable around cyclists. There's a lot of cyclists in the area. I didn't feel bad. And the west of Ireland is, how many cars are you going to see in a day? If you get past two hands, it was a busy day. On a given day, you see more sheep. I told people my trip to Ireland, I came back and we got our fancy hotel in Ireland, and I took my bicycle shoes out to pack them, and sheep pellets fell out on the floor of the fancy hotel. The tour brochure said, what did it say? We put mud guards, that's fenders for Yanks, on our bikes, and if you bring your bike, we recommend you do too, because we have sheep in this country.
So I noticed that this bicycle has rims, but the others don't. Is that commonly, is that,
The fenders on them?
yes.
So most bikes don't in this part of the country. The e-bike came with it. So when the e-bike came, it had a chain guard on it, which we took off and threw away right away, because the chain guard interferes with cleaning and moving the chain. It also has a nasty tendency, it's a full chain guard, it covers everything, to get out of alignment and rub. The second thing we did is the fender used to come to here, we hacked it off, because the way it engages in the trailer, you couldn't cover the back wheel engage. And this is a new one, and most of the other ones we threw the front fender away. Again, because the way it fits in the trailer, it doesn't do well with the front fender. You tend to add all these things to the e-bike because of the idea that weight doesn't matter. And you tend to not put them, although honestly, this is a fender. This design rack that's solid keeps the person behind you from getting sprayed.
I just remember as a kid, if I were out riding my 10-speed, those, which had, it was in the rain, you'd get this stripe up your
Yeah.
back of,
Schwinn Varsity, it weighed as much as that.
well, it wasn't Schwinn, but yeah.
Any other questions?
I just, Mark, thank you for your talk. I'm sorry I can't be there today, but I'm Donna. I have just a question about walking
Yes.
tour I'm going on. I'm going to be on Road Scholar and going to Europe, and they recommend that we use walking poles or hiking poles.
Yes.
And I went over to Dick's and looked at them, and I didn't know, I wasn't confident in purchasing them. I didn't know if they were the right kind to get. And I was just wondering if you have any recommendations about where to get and what type, and do I need one or two? I don't understand what the
Okay.
difference is.
So, good question. People use them differently.
Uh-huh.
So I've hiked long distance. I'm a scoutmaster. I've done 80-mile weeks, and I always carry one and seldom use it. If you in any way aggravate a knee or something, you can support it. I would probably buy both, buy two. They can get fancy. They can have little shock absorbers in them, everything else. The key thing that I mentioned earlier is you've got to have covers for the tips, or they have to be rubber tipped. When you go to these places, you've got ones that are made for hiking off-road on trails, and they have these metal tips. You will not have a friend if you take those into, you won't be able to carry them in buildings. They may not even allow them in Europe. So you want something that's rubber tipped or has a removable cover.
Okay.
I think there's any bad ones. I'm on the other side, so I tend to go to REI.
Yeah,
REI, the nearest REI is Timonium, I think.
Christiana,
Christiana from here?
yeah.
If you can go up to Christiana, REI is really good in that all their salespeople have to do some activity. So when you say, I want to buy poles, they're going to get the person who hikes regularly with poles to go through it.
You can get walking
Great.
poles that have interchangeable tips too.
Right.
You don't have to have a cover. You can get an interchangeable. It could be the little stabby thing, or it could be the rubber thing.
They will make them with shock absorbers. That's for going downhill in rough terrain, where you come down and you hit the poles. You probably don't need that walking. You just need something simple.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you very much.
And did you see my little thing earlier on the hiking about the little
Chair.
pack seat, the little chair?
Yeah, I saw that. I'd never heard of that.
I don't know if you're the kind, well, it depends where you're going. I mean, if you're in European cities, it's probably benches. But if
Yeah.
you're in other places, you could consider that. It's just how big a pack you want to carry.
So in addition for the hiking poles, I would recommend looking for something that's sturdy, that's not going to break easily, and that's easily adjustable, because you have to have it at the right height for your height. I believe it's got to be at like 90 degrees, so you want to make sure that your pole can be adjusted easily. Some are more difficult to adjust than others. So that's another feature I would look for in hiking poles.
They're all relatively fragile. If they're all relatively fragile, you can break any one of them by coming down on it hard.
Yeah, it's not meant for your full weight, but you don't want it to
Yeah.
fall apart easily. But it needs to be easily adjustable. Some of them are harder to adjust than others.
Another good reason to go to REI and talk to somebody and.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Loves to have you try different things. Anyone else? Okay, you have to do all your homework now for Rhodes Scholar, though. Okay, that's it. I'm gonna hang around here. If anybody has any questions, wants to look at the bikes, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks for doing